Morning everybody. I've got another 3 emails to run through this morning. Not too much superannuation stuff today. We've got a bit more on trusts actually, but I still think that they're relevant, certainly useful to accountants. This is Advisor's Digest. So the first one, hi Pete, hope all is well and back into the swing. We recently picked up a job, a doctor from Queensland. He's got a medical practice company and a trust, which was set up to use as an investment vehicle. He's currently in a de facto relationship with a girlfriend, they're calling him, and I was looking at his deed to see if he can distribute to her. I've attached the 2 relevant pages from the deed. Can you advise if his trust can distribute to his girlfriend? Unfortunately, the 2 pages we got from the deed were the schedule at the back and the definition of beneficiaries. So I went back to the advisor and I said, well, you can distribute to a spouse. There's nothing under definition of beneficiaries that says you can distribute to your girlfriend. So we need to know whether or not this person is a spouse. And how do you know if someone is a spouse? Hopefully, a good deed would have a definition of spouse in it. And thankfully, this one did. And it says spouse includes A person who is legally married to another person, and then B, a de facto spouse, being a woman living with a man as his wife or a man living with a woman as her husband. So it's pretty old-fashioned, that definition. However, it goes on to include same-sex couples lately. So effectively, if this girlfriend is living on a bona fide domestic basis with this doctor, then under the definition of spouse in the trust deed, then she's his spouse. And if the deed says that you can distribute to the spouse of that doctor, then the trust may distribute to her under the provisions of the deed. If it left the word spouse out, so in the definition of beneficiary, it included a spouse, so the default beneficiaries, any spouse of the default beneficiaries, and that was a lowercase spouse, and there is no definition of spouse in the deed, you then really move back to the common law definition of what is a spouse. What would the relevant common law definition be there? You might go to the Acts Interpretation Act. The Acts Interpretation Act does define spouse, but it only says it includes people that are married. So it doesn't help with de factos. The Family Law Act clearly defines de facto relationship, and that would have you as a spouse. Does he put this lady down as his spouse on his tax return? If he's saying he's single, you might be saying, well, if he's single, then this lady isn't a spouse. Of course, we're covered there because it's in the deed. Always remember to read the deed. The next one, also about trusts. And once again, we talk about reading the deed. So good afternoon. I was just wondering if you had any written explanation and/or can you advise me whether you need to do anything else apart from deregistering a trustee company of a unit trust with ASIC and also lodging a final return or no further returns necessary with the ATO for the unit trust. So it sounds to me like this unit trust is finished. Maybe they have or haven't paid everything out and now they just want to get rid of it. And we all know that if you say final return to the tax office and you deregister the trustee company, effectively all the registrations are gone and you would think there's nothing else to do. But where do we refer people when they ask a question? Go to the trust deed. What does the trust deed say? Read the trust deed and see what it says. On the vesting day, what do you do with the money? Each trust will have some sort of clause on winding up and what you do when you wind up. Normally, all it would be was that the trustee receives all of the money or the assets from the fund and distributes it in a unit trust in accordance with the unit holder's percentages of ownership of the unit trust. If there's nothing left in the trust and there's nothing to distribute, then you would note that the trust no longer exists because we no longer have trust corpus. We can prepare a vesting deed or a deed of termination, they're often called, with unit trusts, just to state that the trustee has resolved to finish the trust and distribute all the assets to the beneficiaries. And that is common practice. The last one, we're back to SMSFs now. I have a client with an SMSF, my deed, doesn't really matter, who's getting a divorce. The SMSF has a commercial property in that it has no loan on it, and the super balances are roughly 50-50. The property was previously under an LRBA, so the property is still in the bare trust. Can the client establish a new LRBA to pay out the spouse's share? Now, let's just run through this separately. Commercial property, no loan on it, super balances are 50-50. We'll just pick a number. The advisor didn't give us a number. Let's say it's worth 500 grand, no problem. So clearly 250,000 each. Was previously under an LRBA and it's still in the bare trust. No problem with that whatsoever. You can keep the property in the bare trust going forward, even when the loan's paid out. So now, can the client establish a new LRBA to pay out the spouse's share? Section 67A says that you can borrow for the purpose of acquiring a single acquirable asset. Or you can repay a loan, you can borrow to repay a borrowing, or you can borrow for repairs. Can't borrow for improvements. Now, is this either the acquisition of the asset, is it repairs, or is it repaying an existing loan? The answer is no. So to answer the question, can the client establish a new LRBA? No, they can't. Doesn't really help, but also it was the wrong question. So can the client do anything to solve their problem? The beauty of this situation is that it's business real property. So they can set up another fund and have that fund borrow $250,000, assuming that's the number, to buy this property off the other fund. Now the other $250,000 becomes an in specie rollover of the property to the other fund. So then what you have is fund number 2 with the husband. I'm assuming here it's the husband that's buying out the wife. Fund number 2, it has an LRBA of 250 grand and the husband's balance of 250 sitting in that fund and the property's in that fund. Over here in the first fund, all we have is the wife with a cash balance of 250,000, which she can then roll over. Now, of course, splitting orders can be dealt with here if you want to change the numbers. Another thing about this strategy is that it is not subject to stamp duty, where the person's rolling out of the super fund. So we're okay with that as well. However, it is subject to capital gains tax. I spoke to this advisor and he said that they haven't owned the property that long and he doesn't believe that there will be any capital gains. Otherwise, it would be subject to capital gains tax. Of course, if we had the court orders ordering that to happen, then most likely you would have rollover relief on the capital gains tax as well. We have another matter in front of us at the moment where it's a divorce for people over the age of 60 and the wife wants to take the house out of the super fund. We think we can get away with having that distributed out without stamp duty because it'll be part of a court order. So that's this morning. Thank you very much. And I look forward to you tuning in next Monday morning. Obviously, if you're not one of our advisors and you're watching this video on LinkedIn or something like that, and you would like to know more, peter@thesmsfexpert.com.au, or just visit our website, thesmsfexpert.com.au. You'll notice our website is all about getting you more clients. Thank you.